few thumbs up.
All right, so thank you very much for being here today. Also for those online via streaming. It's my pleasure today to have here Francesco Panerai and Laura Villafañe from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign from the Aerospace department. We're going to have 2 talks of roughly 20 minutes each. We will start with Francesco. He did a PhD thesis in, in von Karman Institute. And then he moved to the United States, to the NASA Ames Research Center. And then he got an assistant professor position at Chicago, at Illinois. And he's going to be talking today about fluid dynamics. And the talk of the title of the talk is Time Resolved Reaction and Diffusion Limited Carbon Oxidation Dynamics at the Micro Scale, which you will have to explain us what this means. And then Laura will come after Francesco. So floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here today.
All right, so it's okay that I don't wear a mask, right? I think we are far enough that, you guys studied a bit of diffusion, so anyway, we'll deal with it. Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here and to visit Spain, to visit Madrid, also to know some to meet in person some friends there where we have sort of exchange a lot of email and virtual communication. So I really appreciate the invitation. So in fact, this is a talk that is a mix of fluid mechanics and material science, and you will see why, right? In fact, what we care is high temperature. Is high temperature materials that are porous media, and so there is transport inside. And what I'm going to do is to give a little bit of background of where the interest on this type of systems come from, and then I will show some recent experiments that we have been doing in this area. So. All right, so this is a picture of about 2 weeks ago. Is the SpaceX Crew Dragon that re-entered from the space station. So you see this coming down from space, from low Earth orbit, and you see there is a body here. Which is still hot, right? So this went through what is called atmospheric re-entry. And this is the systems that we care about, and we are going to talk about today. So I don't know. I think like many of you here have an aerospace background. So I have atmospheric re-entry class in one slide, atmospheric re-entry 101. So we start from here, right? From the International Space Station, and about 400 kilometers altitude above the surface of the Earth, right? And we have a system in orbit. So imagine that this orbits at the first cosmic velocity, right? 7.7 kilometers per second. So if you take a kinetic energy about 100 gigajoule, yeah. And a few minutes after you want to land in the ground, where of course the kinetic energy is 0. And the velocity is 0. Otherwise, if you carry astronauts, then you run into a lot of trouble. You can also get with an impact velocity, but it's not advisable when you're carrying a crew. So the question is, what happens to all this kinetic energy? Anyone that wants to try? What happens to this kinetic energy is converted into heat, right? And so, this is stagnation enthalpy, Cp dt U infinity squared divided by 2. And in fact, you see that you need to dissipate a big portion of this kinetic energy into heat. How bad is this? Well, this is quite bad because the heat transfer, in fact, scales with the cube of the velocity. So. If you take the amount of heat that needs to dissipate, this is probably the heat that you need to warm up or cool down like during summer your house in about 1,000 years, right? So in 3 minutes or in 10 minutes, this is kind of the amount of energy that you need to dissipate. So now you know that in this scenario, the system re-enters at hypersonic speed. The flow crosses like a very strong shock, and most of the heat is being dissipated in the flow. But there is still a portion of this amount of heat that reaches the surface. Yeah, and this is about 1% of the total heating, and this 1% is still very high. Just to give you an example, we're talking about 75 watt per centimeter square of heat flux to the surface for the space shuttle. I put Mars 2020, which is another type of system that we care about. Apollo, like when you are talking about high-speed entry from the moon, about 450 watts per centimeter square. And so just to compare with a small toaster or a typical appliance, so we are like about a factor 10 to the power of 3 difference between the two. Anyway, so this is just to tell you that what we need is a thermal protection system, and this is what this talk is going to focus on, is some investigations that we are doing in this area. You see many of the systems that we work on and we care about. So those are systems that NASA uses to bring astronauts back from the space station or to land robotic missions to the surface of Mars. You can also take typical NASA spacecraft, turn it around, and then you have a system that looks like this one that is used in national security, but those also like carry a thermal protection system. So what technologies do we use? So typically there are two classes of thermal protection systems that are being applied. And so this is a very busy chart that actually is going to appear next year in the annual review of fluid mechanics that we are writing in this area. In the y-axis you have altitude, in the x-axis you have velocities, and you see typical trajectories, re-entry trajectories of different type of systems. So you have some of them that plunge into the atmosphere at very fast velocity. We're talking Mach between 30 and 50. Whereas you have other systems like the space shuttle here that glide onto the atmosphere, right? So they have a much milder but longer time that they spend in the atmosphere. So for this class of system, heating are lower, so we can use what we call reusable system, right? So the typical example, which is very famous, is space shuttle piles. Whereas for this system here, we use what are called ablators. Yeah, and that's the category that we are going to focus on. So how do we build an ablator? So we use carbon fibers. That's where material science come to rescue here. And and so we take this is unfortunately a bit dark here, but it's a bunch of carbon fiber that are the size of about a human hair or smaller. And then you take some resin, you pour it on this rigid fibrous structure, do some magic, and you end up with a very lightweight material that is extremely good insulator. Okay, the material that I'm going to talk about is called the phenolic impregnated carbon ablator, or PICA. So this is the main material used by NASA for this type of missions. It's the one that was used in Mars Science Laboratory, in Mars 2020 is used also for the next Titan mission the next mission to Titan, which is called Dragonfly, to deliver octocopter. So it's the main technology that NASA has developed in this area. So you see here some examples where it was used. The one on the left-hand side is the Stardust sample return capsule. In fact, it's the fastest man-made object ever re-entered to Earth. So this velocity was 12 kilometers per second. So heating is particularly high. All right. So I have one last introduction slide here, which is how does an ablator work, and how do we study it? Well, so you see that is a quite multi-physics type of environment, right? So you have the decomposition of the phenolic resin that produces a blowback of gases through the material. Remember that this is a very highly porous medium made about 90% air or voids, right? So where the gases are traveling, of course, there is heat transfer. There is transport of gases inside the porous medium, and most of the actions really happens very close to the surface. Very close to the surface, where we have, if we are entering in Earth, we have a lot of oxygen, and the oxygen interacts with the carbon fiber and gasifies the carbon, right? So for those of you that like chemistry, I'm not one of those, but I need to deal with it. So you have carbon that reacts with O2 and forms CO2, or carbon that reacts with oxygen and forms C. So you have solid carbon that gets depleted into a gas. Yeah. So that's really the essence of the ablation phenomenon. What determines the material to recess, the material to decompose, and that's actually the material to dissipate heat. Okay. Well, so the point that I want to make across today is that all these phenomena that you see there, and all these multiphysics effects, are driven by the way the microstructure is architected. Yeah. So by the way the fibers are organized in space, by the way the resin is arranged in between the fiber. That is, what I kind of mean with microscale effect, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. So, for those of you who are familiar with fluids, and I'm not pretending to go through the entire equation set here. How do we model this material? In fact, we solve Navier-Stokes combined with heat transfer and combined with pyrolysis, the composition. So this is one of the most updated model to solve this. So what I want to talk about is, so how does the microstructure actually affect the way we model this material, and how we can do experiment to understand this microstructure. Okay. So you see here on the left-hand side, this is a scanning electron micrograph, so it's a 2D image of the three-dimensional material architecture. And so before, a few years ago, when we were trying to model this material, we were using what I call the poor man sort of representation of this. So we were taking cylinders and put them in a box, and sort of think that this could represent the three-dimensional structure of this porous media that we are dealing with. Of course, you see that's not a very good representation of the architecture, and so that's what led us to use X-rays to try to resolve those structures. And so the technique that we are using is called X-ray microthermography. For those of you who are probably that have done tomographic PIV, kind of understand what this is. This is kind of a similar thing applied to material science, and this is what you do like in the hospital when you get a CT scan, right? So you get into this table, and then you have an X-ray source that rotates about your body and gives you a three-dimensional image of your body. Here we do it the opposite way, right? So we have a steady X-ray source. We turn an object inside, and we get a reconstruction in 3 dimensions of the material. So we use a combination of synchrotron and X-ray and laboratory X-ray sources to do that. In fact, most of those that I'm going to talk about are synchrotron type of X-ray imaging that we have been doing. So most of the work that we have done in this area is in collaboration with the Advanced Light Source at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. These are some of our collaborators. And the advantage is synchrotron light sources are particle accelerators similar to, there is a few in Europe. Think about the CERN, right? So where you have electrons that spin at the speed of light, and then when they turn, they produce X-rays. And we use these X-rays to do the imaging that I discussed. Anyway, so if you do that and you apply to the structure, then you get images like the one that you see depicted here, which is a lot better than the box of a few cylinders that we have shown before. So this is our type of three-dimensional images that give you a full picture of how the material is architected, how the porous media is organized in space. But not only a pretty picture, are also like a description of the material into a three-dimensional grid. So if you have the description of the material into a three-dimensional grid, then you can use it to do many things. And again, I'm going to give you a few examples, but not go through all of them. So you can use it to simulate flow transport, so determine material permeability or material tortuosity, and look at how the flow is transported through the pores. You can use it for thermal transport. So the resulting, in fact, thermal conductivity of these composites is given by the way the fibers are organized, and the thermal conductivity of the fibers plus the thermal conductivity of the gas that is contained in between the fibers, and then you can use it to resolve chemistry. So this is a lot part of the work that that I've been doing in the past with some of my collaborators at NASA, and we are continuing right now. And I'm going to show a few examples of this. So based on these images, we built a model for the oxidation problem that I mentioned earlier, where we can simulate the gasification of carbon based on a particle method. Okay, so what we do is we take a three-dimensional image. We walk particles inside the porous medium, particles that represent oxygen. These particles would hit the fibers, right, and would take some of the materials away. So we simulate diffusion, in fact, with random walks, and we have a sticking probability model to simulate the removal of carbon. I can give you further details later on if you're interested. So this process is kind of very well explained if you look at time-dimensional number that is called the TLA number. For those that are familiar with combustion, I don't know if there is anyone working in combustion here. The TLA number is kind of a dumb-color number. Okay, so is a contrast between diffusion and reaction. Okay, so how fast oxygen can diffuse in the porous medium and how fast the oxygen reacts with the carbon. Okay, so this model can capture the three regime of the carbon oxidation. So a reaction limited regime is when the reaction in fact is low, and so the particles can penetrate inside the porous medium and decompose the material in depth. On the other hand, the opposite asymptotic limit is the diffusion limited regime, where instead the oxidation process is very fast, so it happens all at the surface and the material recesses, right? So oxidation is very fast and diffusion is low, and then in reality, you would have probably something in between. Okay, all right. So this is a simulation, yeah. So it's taking the real image of the material and apply a model to it. Well, now what I'm going to show you is actually that it's possible to capture this experimentally, and it's something that we've done about a year ago, and we're still busy in processing some of the results. So, of course, we are using X-rays again, but this time, instead of using only X-rays on a static model, we use X-rays in a very fast setup that allows us to capture the dynamics of this decomposition problem. So we apply what is called environmental X-ray tomography. I'm going to skip here because I'm kind of short on time. And so we did experiments at a light source in Europe. It's called the Swiss light source. Is the Tomcat setup where they developed. It's just basically it's a fast camera. So it's a camera that streams like large amount of data directly into a server. So each one of these data sets is on the order of several gigabytes, and then when you want to resolve it with second type of resolution, you need a particular setup basically to acquire the data. So here probably I have let me see. Oh, I don't have a movie of it. Oh, here I have. So it's a movie of how the setup works. So again, you imagine you have X-rays here with some optics that are getting the images, and then inside we put a reactor that simulates the high temperature environment that you have during atmospheric entry. So I'll show you how this works. So we use lamps to heat up the material, and then inside we have an oxidation reactor with this porous media. and with oxygen flowing through this porous medium. So at each rotation that you see here, we get one three-dimensional image of several gigabytes and stream it onto a server. It's pretty amazing. Yep. So I'm going to go one image back here to explain how this works, how the reactor is made. So we get this porous media here in the middle, right? So we flow oxygen, and then this is in the focal spot of these lamps that provide the heating. Yep. So if we do that, this is what we obtain, and this is a bit dark, so I hope this is what we obtain. So we can watch. This is a little bit slowed down compared to how in reality works. So we can fully resolve in 4D how the material decomposes under the effect of oxygen. So remember, I showed you the three regimes. Actually, I'm gonna skip this and skip this and go actually directly to the result. I'll show you the three regimes that we can capture numerically. So now with these techniques, you can see these in fact experimentally, and so we can resolve the diffusion limited regime, where you see that the carbon is all gasified at the surface. We can resolve the mixed regime, where we have an in-depth decomposition of the material, and then we can resolve the reaction limited regime, where you see that the material decomposes in depth until actually a certain point it loses structural strength because it is decomposed inside, and then it collapses under its weight. So this is pretty remarkable. It has also like a very big significance for atmospheric entry, because so if I show this again, if I show this again, and if you think about this in terms of actual hypersonic flight, so the part on the right is when you are at high temperature, and the part on the left is when you are at low temperatures, where you would think that you're actually safe. But you see that actually the low temperature regime is where the material decomposes in the interior, and it actually the thermal protection system loses structural strength. And so this is an important finding that we're trying to quantify a little bit better right now. So of course you can do a lot more things, and so you can look at the evolution of the porosity of the medium in depth. So again, you see different oxidation penetrations depending on whether you are in the mixed regime or whether you are in the reaction limited or in the diffusion limited regime. All right, so I have one last slide. Well, remember at some point I mentioned that we can use these images to compute transport, right? So one of the things that we have is a software that can compute effective thermal conductivity of those materials, right? So you can take a conductivity for the carbon, take conductivity for the gas that is inside, and use the organization of the material architecture in 3 dimensions to get an effective thermal conductivity of the material. Yeah. So now that you have a resolution of the dynamics of the material in time, yeah, you can compute how, in fact, all the effective properties. I'm showing the thermal conductivity here as an example, as it evolves in time, and as it evolves as the material decomposes. Yeah. So this is like sort of breakthrough in this field, in the sense that what we were doing before is we had a measurement somewhere for the virgin material, a measurement here for the fully decomposed material, and we were interpolating, like doing a linear interpolation between the two. But now that we have temporal resolution of the dynamics of how this evolves, then we can compute effective properties as a function of time and as a function of decomposition. So I skipped a lot of details, and I'll be happy to take questions. What I want to do is actually to jump to the conclusion. So I hope in a few slides I convince you that we can really use 3D or actually really 4D imaging, right, to resolve the dynamics of material at high temperatures. There is a lot of, since there is like, a prime effort here in fluids, there is a lot of opportunities also to resolve the fluid mechanics inside this media in 4 dimensions, and so it's a powerful tool that really allows us to understand how this material behave under actual atmospheric reentry. So I'm going to leave it here, and I'll be happy to take any question.